We all know that I'm a spooky lady, so I am jumping on the Summerween October bandwagon with both feet. So today we're going to make some cute and spooky Summerween popsicles or ice pops for my American friends out of paper mache. I'll walk you through it step by step, and I've also got a free template and a full supply list for you.
Let's do it.
I'm going to show you two versions of this project today. The first is an easy mode popsicle. All you really need is your paper mache supplies, a large tongue depressor size popsicle stick, and some acrylic painting supplies. The second option is maybe this more experienced crafter level, but still not at all what I would call difficult. We'll call this a standard mode project. You'll need some air dry clay for this one. I have a complete supply list for both options in the description, but if you're gonna ignore that, please make sure you get a paper-based air dry clay for this project. I recommend either DOS or Creative Paper Clay. These brands have the characteristics we need for you to be successful with this project. I'm not sponsored or anything, I've just used a lot of crappy clays in my day. So we're going to start with this template here. You can grab it free on my website or cheap on my Patreon. Whether you take it for free or buy it for cheap, I don't really care. I just want you to give this project a go. So we're going to start with the template. You can see there are two popsicle shapes, one labeled inner, one labeled outer, and the outer piece is the slightly smaller of the two. Using a sharp pair of scissors, cut out the two pattern pieces as accurately and neatly as you can. Here I'm showing you how the outer piece will sit on top of the inner piece. We're going to cut two of each of these out of corrugated cardboard. Now you'll notice that both template pieces have this mark on them that indicates the direction that you want the pattern piece to sit with the corrugations in the cardboard. If you look at the cardboard, you can kind of see the vertical lines of the corrugations inside. So since the corrugations on this piece of card are running vertically, we're going to place the pattern piece vertically like this. I'm going to trace two copies of this inner piece with a ballpoint pen. This gives me a nice sharp line. This dashed line here indicates where the popsicle stick will get glued in later. Use a sharp tool or a push pin to poke some holes along the line. We'll trace two copies of this smaller outer piece as well, making sure those corrugations are running top to bottom on your template piece. Using a sharp craft knife, cut out all of these pieces as accurately as you can. You might also want to mark which pieces are the inner pieces and which are the outer. Remember, the bigger ones are the inner pieces. You can tell by the scribbled out letters here that I already mixed them up myself. Next, I'm using my thumb and pressing the pieces against the table to curve the pieces along the corrugations. This is why it was so important that we had them running in the right direction. When we stick the pieces together later, we want the curves to hug around the popsicle stick. This makes our final sculpture look a little less blocky. We're going to set the two smaller outer pieces to the side and bring in our popsicle sticks here. I should say this is not an actual popsicle stick. This is a 6-inch long craft stick. It's the same size as a wooden tongue depressor your doctor might use, or like a waxing stick an esthetician might have. So you see I've spread some good quality white glue all over the inner piece that I poked the dots into, and we're just going to use the dots as a guide to place this stick. I'll put some more glue on top of the stick. I'm using an old gift card to spread the glue around. You could probably skip this step and put the other inner piece on top and squeeze those two pieces together firmly for a few minutes until the glue grabs. Now we can bring in these two small outer pieces and spread on a layer of glue. We'll stick this down, centering it in the large inner piece. And of course, we'll repeat for the other side too. Squeeze this together firmly for a few minutes until the glue starts to grab, and then once you're sure the gluey pieces aren't going to slip around on you, you can put something heavy on top of your popsicle and let it dry completely. This should only take about an hour or two. So I made a few of these. Here are mine all dry. I'm going to put 2 layers of paper mache over the top of these. If you want to learn more about how I apply my paper mache, including the best paste recipe, the best paper to use, and all that good stuff, I have a whole video that breaks that down for you. I'll link it in the description. When you're applying your paper mache, you want to use thin, short patches of paper, and you want to wrap them around the edge of the popsicle to make a nice bevel. So you don't want to push the paper into the corners like I'm showing you here. You want to just wrap it over the edge to give that nice popsicle shape. To work around the stick, fold the edge of your paper over to thicken it up a bit, and then place 4 of those around the 4 sides of your stick. Use some torn paper to cover up the extra bit of fold and blend everything together. So I did 2 layers of paper mache around the edges and then just 1 layer on the flat top and back. And then I set these on this grate and put them over my air vent to dry overnight. Here they are all dry. I realized I forgot to put in a hanging loop for these guys. I'm gonna hang them on my wall, and the best way to do that, in my experience, is to integrate a hanging loop right into the sculpture. I'm just using this cheapo craft wire I got from the dollar store. I'm using about 10 centimeters and twisting it into a loop, then I zigzag the ends like this. I'm using a bit of hot glue to stick that to the popsicle, and then covering the ends with a few strips of paper mache. These few little strips will be dry in no time at all.
Now here's where you can decide whether you want to finish your popsicle on easy mode or standard mode. If you want to finish on easy mode, we're going to move right on to painting. I'll show you that process next. But if you're interested in giving your popsicle a little bit of 3-dimensional character with some air dry clay, you can skip to this timestamp or stick around and watch them both.
So once all our paper mache is dry, we're going to give this easy mode popsicle 2 coats of gesso. If you don't have any gesso, you can make your own. I give you a recipe in this video. I'll link that in the description too. After the gesso, I gave the entire popsicle a base coat of light purple. I used an ombre effect, making the popsicle lighter purple at the top and darker purple at the bottom, but you certainly don't have to make it that complicated. From here, you can paint any spooky character you like. I'm starting with some black hair. I'm covering the top third of the popsicle, and I'm giving the hair like a drippy, melty look in keeping with our Summerween theme. When that's dry, I'm going to sketch in a little hair bow. I'm filling this in with gesso before I go in with paint. That's just so I get good coverage. I'm giving her a cute little smiley face and a few little sprinkles. And then when the paint is all dry, I'm going in with a white paint marker to add some highlights. Then I mixed up this mid-color purple to add some shadows opposite the highlights. And here's the paint job all dry. To finish her off, I'm giving this popsicle a couple generous coats of matte Mod Podge and setting her aside to dry.
So that was the easy mode version of the project. Now I'm going to show you 3 versions of this project in standard mode: a bat, a zombie, and a jack-o'-lantern.
Let's do it.
So here are my 3 paper mache and dried popsicles. Off camera, I sketched out my design ideas, and if you've watched some of my videos before, you know that I usually like to start with pre-making some of the bits and pieces that will go into my sculptures. I've just noted here the pieces for each that I want to make a head. Typically, I would also make eyeballs, but I have these buttons that I'm going to use for their eyes. These are also linked in the description, but if you don't want to buy them, you can easily make some eyes out of clay at this point too. Okay, let's get started with the bat's wings. I'm working on one of these plastic mats you see me using all the time. I got this one at Dollar Tree, but I put a link to something similar in my supply list. I do recommend a firm plastic work surface for this project because it won't wrinkle up on you and the plastic doesn't absorb moisture out of the clay while you're trying to work with it. When you take your clay out of the package, give it a bit of a knead to soften it up and then press it out into a pancake on the placemat. From there, I'm using this wooden pasta roller to roll this out into a sheet of about a ½ centimeter thick. If you don't have a pasta roller, you can also use a jar or a bottle sprinkled with cornstarch. As you're rolling, stop and flip the clay over every few strokes and also rotate it 90 degrees. This will help you get a nice even slab without it sticking to the rolling pin or the placemat. So I'm just sketching out a pair of bat wings. It is a bit of a tricky shape, so I did add a bat wing to the template for you. And I'm cutting these out with my craft knife. I'll use my finger with the tiniest bit of water on it to round over the cut edges. And then I'm using the handle of a paintbrush to give the wings a bit of definition. When I'm happy with how these look, I'll set them aside and we'll make some ears. The ears start as a ball of clay. One trick I use if I'm looking to make 2 parts that are the same size is to start with a ball of clay and then cut that in half. It's really easy to eyeball halfway through a ball, and this way we're starting with the same amount of clay for each ear, so it's easier to make them the same size. We'll start by rolling each ear into a ball and then pinching it into a teardrop shape. I'll flatten that a little bit and then use the end of my paintbrush to push a little indent in there. After I make the second ear, I'll set them aside to dry and then make a bunch of little pointy teeth. I usually make a few more than I think I need, just for good measure. Like I said earlier, I'm going to use these buttons for eyes, but if you want, you can make some eyes out of clay now too. And these are all the pieces I need to make for the bat right now, so I'm going to set these aside to dry. For the zombie, I just need to make an ear. Just one. I figure the other one maybe got ripped off when he was zombified. I'll also make a bunch of rectangular teeth now too. Again, I'm making a few different sizes of teeth and more than I think I need. And again, I'm showing you my eye buttons to remind you that you should make eyes for your zombie at this point too. Finally, for the jack-o'-lantern, I just need to make a little pumpkin stem. His face will be carved in like a real jack-o'-lantern, so that's all we need. I make the stem by starting with a cone shape and then smushing down the point. Then I use a tool to carve some vertical lines in. You don't need any fancy sculpting tool to do this, a toothpick will work just fine. So with that done, we're going to set these aside to dry. I left mine overnight in a warm spot with lots of airflow. Before we move on, we need to go ahead and put some hanging loops on the back of these. Okay, let's make a bat. Let's bring in one of our popsicles and our little bat pieces, and then we're gonna flatten a big old wad of clay and roll it into a sheet about a ½ centimeter thick. I'm gonna place my popsicle onto that sheet of clay and gently trace around it. And then I'm gonna draw a big old drippy edge a little lower than halfway. I added a drip edge to the template too, in case you don't wanna freehand it. I'm also going to add a 2 centimeter border around the edge of my popsicle and cut that out with my craft knife. I'm going to use a slightly damp finger to round over the drippy edge on both the front and back of this cutout. I used the smaller end of my rolling pin to help smooth out some of those sketch lines. Next, I'm putting a generous amount of white glue on the back of this clay slab. And this here is one of the reasons I insist on using a paper-based clay, because this glue trick is not going to work with every type of clay. And then we'll gently place this over our popsicle and curve it over the sides and top. Now I can bring in my dry wings, add a bit of glue to the base, and then shove them into the wet clay. We'll do the same thing with the ears. See how simple that is? This is why I like to make these bits ahead of time and let them dry. It makes things so stupidly easy. I'm using my glue to draw a small smile and then stick on some of those pointy teeth. To make a top lip, I roll out a snake of clay, smush down one edge with my thumb, and then place it over the teeth. And blend the smush edge into the sculpture. I thought his smile looked a little bit weird, so I made these little comma pieces and placed them at the edge of his lips. I blended those in with a sculpting tool, but that's totally optional. I think I liked it better before I did this, honestly. I made a little bat nose, which is just a triangular shape with some nostrils pushed into it. I used a bit of white glue to stick this to my bat's face, and then I blended in the edges with a tool and a slightly damp paintbrush. Finally, I'm bringing in my button eyes. I'm using a pair of side cutters to cut off the shanks. Then I'm adding a small drop of glue and pushing these firmly into the clay. And that's it. That's the little bat face. So cute, right? And this is the most difficult of the 3 standard mode popsicles. The zombie is even cuter and even simpler. So for the zombie, we're going to start with a big slab of clay again, trace gently around a papier-mâché popsicle, cut out that drippy edge with a 2 centimeter border, round over the edges with a damp finger, and then use some glue to stick that to the popsicle. I'm going to use a small bit of glue to make a little frown with 4 teeth and a small wad of clay to make a lower lip. I'll blend the edge of my lip into the sculpture. Next, I'm pushing some rotted nose holes into the clay with the end of my tool. I put a little bit of glue onto the base of the dried earpiece and press that into the side of his zombie popsicle head. I'm using my craft knife to cut out a section of clay where the zombie's brains will be coming out. I rounded out this area with a tiny bit of clay here. I also smoothed out the cut edge with a slightly damp finger. Finally, my original plan was to use 2 black buttons for the eyes, but I found this smaller red bloodshot eye in my stash and I just had to use it. Again, I used side cutters to cut the backs off of these and push them into the clay with a bit of white glue. And that's the zombie sculpture all done. I can't wait to paint this guy. He's really going to come alive, or come undead. The third, and arguably the easiest of the three, is the jack-o'-lantern. You know the deal by now. Prep and place the clay base, and then use some white glue to install that pumpkin stem we made earlier. I'll use my tool to make some curved, pumpkin-y lines coming down from the stem. Then I'll use a damp finger to kind of tone those down a bit. From there, I'm simply sketching in some rounded, droopy jack-o'-lantern features and cutting those out with my craft knife. I'm using my craft knife to gently coax the clay out of the cutouts, and again, I'll use a slightly damp finger to smooth over the cut edges. How easy is that? So stinking cute. Now we're going to set these aside to dry. You don't want these to dry too quickly or they might crack, so make sure you don't leave them out baking in the sun or anything. Let them dry slowly in a place with lots of airflow. These are all dry, but it's far too nice to be sitting inside working today, so we're going to set up a little craft station out here and paint them on my patio. All right, we're all set up on my patio table here. I hope you don't mind the lighting too much. It's going to be changing a little bit, but I think it's nice and natural and summery. Before we start painting this little bat, I'm using this nail file to smooth out any bumps and wrinkles. I really like these for sanding clay because they're super affordable and you can rinse them off with water when you're done. Don't forget to protect your lungs while sanding, and don't forget to wipe the dust off with a damp cloth before you move on to painting. I want to paint the lower part of this popsicle purple, but I'm not getting very good coverage with this purple paint, so I'm mixing in a bit of cornstarch and water to improve the opacity. You can see this gives me a really opaque paint that dries to a nice matte finish. I'll give the batty portion of this popsicle a couple coats of this medium gray, and then I'm painting his little teeth white. Finally, I'll use the end of my paintbrush to dot on some cheeky purple freckles. After cleaning up the zombie with just a tiny bit of sanding, I'm using that cornstarch trick again to thicken up this brown paint. I'll use this nice chocolatey concoction to give the bottom of the zombie pop a couple good coats of brown. When that's dry, his brain area will get a couple coats of this nice bright pink, and his face gets a base coat of this fun zombie green. I also painted his little teeth white. I made some brain details by connecting a bunch of C shapes painted with a darker pink. I'll add some highlights to those with a pale pink color. Finally, I'm using the end of my paintbrush as a dotting tool, again to give the zombie some dark green freckles. Once more, I'm using some cornstarched green paint to paint the bottom of the pumpkin popsicle, as well as inside the eyes, mouth, and nose. I let that dry really well, and then used my craft knife to scrape off any mistakes. I used this bright orange color to paint the pumpkin, but I thought it was a little too saturated, so after painting yellow around the face cutouts, I went in with a more pastel orange. This pastel color looks more like a frozen treat to me. I used a light brown on the stem, then went in with some bright orange freckles. Back inside the workshop, I gave all three of these a couple of generous coats of matte Mod Podge, and they're done. I hope this video helps you make your own spooky popsicles, and I hope you subscribe for more kick-ass art on a cheap-ass budget. I've been Jane Sawyer, and you can grab the free template for this project at janesawyermakes.com. Give this video a like, hype it if you want to follow me on the socials, and I'll see you on the next one.